And just to ground Lara, like, okay, we're live.
Well,
Hi.
well, I already hit the button anyway. Sorry. That's okay. I was just telling Daniela, we're still in Mercury retrograde shadow for a couple more days. So we're still having breakdowns of technology and communication and all kinds of stuff. So I'm just glad you made it. That's the important thing. It's nice to meet you, Liara.
It's nice to meet you also.
How is things going? Whereabouts are you located?
I'm calling you from the Byron Bay hinterland, about 7 hours north of Sydney, Australia.
Oh, wow. So this is middle of the night for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, we're getting on to 2:30 a.m.
Wow. So kind of you to stay up so late for us. So what brings you to Australia? I can tell you don't have the accent.
No, I was born in the Maritimes in Canada, but I have been in Australia since 2005.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
How exciting.
It is.
I've been to Sydney. It's a wonderful city.
Oh, I'm glad you've enjoyed that. I suppose you've seen
the funniest thing. I was going to say the one thing that stood out the most is when I got off the airplane, it was dusk. And I was looking up and I'm like, wow, look at all the birds. And my friend goes, those aren't birds. And I was like, oh, they were giant bats. Just the whole sky was full of them, millions of them. And I was like, wow, I can tell we are somewhere I've never been before.
Well, look at it this way. They're fruit bats, not vampire bats.
That's good to know. What a wonderful country, though, because there's so much. It's so different down there. It's like going to another planet almost.
Well, in some ways it is. I've been fortunate to live in a number of areas from Melbourne to Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast up in Queensland. And more recently, I've moved 1,500 kilometers down into a mountainous region, which is very beautiful here.
Wonderful. So exciting. So how do you know Daniela? How did you guys meet?
Daniela met me through a program I offered called 30 Shamanic Questions. It was an online program I offered for free to introduce people to different ways of seeing their lives.
Wonderful. And I just fell in love with Liara in the way that she teaches her wealth of expertise and the range of service offerings that Liara shares with students and with clients is really vast and rich and incredibly skillful. Liara has knowledge and service area in the world of yoga. She is an incredible teacher of breath work and breath practices. She's a shamanic practitioner, and she's also a psychotherapist and is able to very skillfully support people in the integration of plant medicine journeys. So when people have experiences, they can work with her. So she is really an incredibly skillful, really masterful, and incredibly grounded and knowledgeable practitioner. So I was just really excited to introduce Liara to you, Lara, and to this community because she's just incredible, like really incredible.
Wonderful. I'm so excited to hear more about what you do. So how did you get into this practice?
Well, gee, how long have you got?
We've got as long as you need, love.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'd love to hear about your personal spiritual journey, and everyone here knows there are some really incredible moments, and there's dark stuff that we go through internally to remember what we are. So anything about your personal story, we'd really love to hear.
Well, there are certainly many stages to any story. And I can certainly say that having lived in many countries around the world did influence my spiritual journey. But moving down under to Australia in 2005 literally turned my life upside down. So, if you're from the Northern Hemisphere, going into the Southern Hemisphere does shake up your energy. I would like to say that I came to realize or lose everything that I thought was important to me. So for me, that was quite pivotal because many people reach stages in their lives where they have expectations. They have a sense of what their values are, what's important, but it often takes significant challenges to allow ourselves to step outside of what I came to see were self-created illusions. So I was working for a company at the time. I wasn't paid, for example, and I wasn't respected. And I had to come to see that that related to my self-worth, my self-esteem, and a number of the ways that I saw myself. So it came to be that I realized I had to start working from the inside out. And up until that point in my life, my focus had been external. I'd worked in diplomacy as an intern in France. I had worked as a university lecturer in international marketing relations. Essentially, I'd worked in public and private sectors, and I just wasn't fulfilled. And I'm sure many people can relate to that in their own lives, in their own way. You know, we do things for a period with a vision of what we feel our goals are, or what we feel would make us happy. And when we're focused on the external, it just doesn't seem to get us where we want to go or how we want to feel. So for me, moving down under turned me inward. I got involved in a lot of spiritual practices. I took up yoga, meditation. I did a lot of modalities that helped me get in touch with things that I've always known, but I haven't really validated. And many people can relate in their lives to, how shall we say, external acceptance is something we often reach for, be it in our families, our entourage. And I have seen sacred geometry, for example, in my midst for my entire life. But I never really knew what it was, what the significance of it was. And over time, I came to see how valuable that is. And I met people who were doing different kinds of research. I participated in some of that. The University of Melbourne, for example, was doing research into something called synesthesia. Have either of you heard of synesthesia before?
Yes, I have. The ability to smell colors and things.
That's right. It's a mixing of the senses. And for a long time, this was my normal, and I never really saw it as anything else. But someone drew my attention to the fact that there are a lot of artists, composers, musicians, artists, creative people that tend to have this mixing of the senses. So I was directed to participate in a research project at the university, and it was essentially an effort to categorize people. You know, could you hear color, see sound, for example, or would you taste rather than smell? You know, exchanges of senses. And I was a bit of a curveball because they couldn't fit me into any category. I suggested that this kind of phenomena can also be a symptom of expansion of consciousness, that as we come to see the world differently, we naturally stop taking in information in limited ways. We take it in different ways, and it sort of flows through us, and we interpret it in a different way. So for me, that's how I look at sacred geometry, because to me, geometry is vibrational. It's a form of sound communication. And whenever I see or hear people, I get a configuration of geometry in my midst. So one of the ways I use that, I will draw it in art. So I've done a number of paintings, but when I work with people and they describe imbalance, or they describe something that isn't quite aligned or in harmony in their lives, that's one of the ways that I'm able to work with them, to help them decode what's going on. Because the logical mind, the left brain, has all of these different categories. It will tell us this is what's wrong with us and why. And sometimes when we have this limited idea of what's wrong with us and how to fix it, we totally overlook the big picture and other things that are going on. So I invite people to incorporate a creative approach, or a right and left brain approach, a more balanced approach, I would suggest, in order to better understand themselves. And this is something that I find useful in psychotherapy and life coaching, but also in the plant medicine integration that Daniela mentioned. Because when people take something like ayahuasca, or there are other plant medicines as well, they're often visions and other kinds of multisensory experiences that happen. And often people are unsure exactly what to make of these things. Sometimes people can write down dreams or visions. Sometimes people will use creative expression to convey the experience. I've had people compose music, sculpt, paint. Sometimes they're unable to put words to exactly what's going on within them as part of their process of integration. And so being able to explore our imagination and our creative abilities, to me, is very important in the integration process.
That's perfect. There's so many people that need this right now. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's a big part of our understanding of ourselves.
Yes, I would agree. And I also find that coming from the Western world, as it's sometimes described, we tend to have a very left brain approach to things. We tend to assume something is wrong with us as a starting point. And that's simply one perspective. We can also come from the starting point that we are whole and complete, and that something within us is blocking that vision, blocking seeing that wholeness. And we can work through that in a different way. Have you heard of that before, taking that kind of approach?
I've recently, I think the universe is starting to push us towards that way, with not in that exact form, but that's what I mean. Everybody has a unique way of looking at things and approaching healing and spiritual development. And your way is so beautiful. You look like you're about to say something, Daniela. Go ahead.
No, I remember being introduced to that years ago through Hess programming and landmark education. That was like the assertion at the beginning of this work. It was like, you are perfect, whole, and complete. Those were the three phrases. And I was like, I felt such a disconnect from that. Like I couldn't even reconcile that. And so the journey over time, and Rumi, kind of will allude to it in that you don't need to seek love, just seek the barriers in yourself, and we can work to dissolve the barriers, that we are an immortal diamond that's just covered up. So let's polish what's blocking our awareness of ourselves as that. So over decades, it's like, I'm like, I buy that. I would put all my quarters on that as truer than anything else I could think about me being or that we're flawed or we're born of sin or any of that stuff.
Well, it's definitely a healthier way of looking at things. And when we start from that point that, okay, there's something within us that we can work with rather than there's something wrong with us, that's a completely different approach also. And it's not as judgmental, because fear and judgment are taught. And really, it's a process of conscious awareness of these things and then the letting go of them and putting into practice what remains.
Exactly. And I feel that many of us are starting as beginners right now because we're just realizing that there is a need for this. So somebody that's just starting out, what would you recommend? Who's just starting to get to know that side of themselves?
Well, many people will start with the idea of affirmations, writing a gratitude journal or seeing things from a positive point of view. But this in and of itself is not going to change how you see yourself, because when it comes to duality, we're taught there's a positive and a negative, and we're taught to avoid our shadows. We're taught to deny them and pretend that we aren't angry or that something is
Bottle
always
it up,
beautiful.
bury it down. Yeah.
That's right. And so there is this process of recognition that needs to that is happening for everyone on some level. And also it has to do with recognizing that what we experience in the external world is a mirror. Many people have heard this, but actually integrating or internalizing it is a little more challenging. We tend to want to blame the external, blame whatever's going on around us on something else, on somebody else. But the process of reclaiming power is all about taking full and complete personal responsibility for your own perceptions, for your own responses. And from that point, then you are truly empowered to change. Because so long as you blame something outside of yourself for what's going on in your life, you don't have the power to change it. You're giving that power away.
Beautifully said. And
Let's
so
not,
many
let's
of us are learning that very hard lesson.
yeah, let's keep unpacking that, because that is like the gem of gems, right? And I think, there's always a part of ourselves looking for the exception to the rule, like yeah, but this. What is your personal journey with reconciling that, and really not only reconciling that view as the nature of reality, but I would even assert, as I've come to know you, relishing that view, really like welcoming that, like without exception, to welcome that without exception.
Well, it certainly is an ongoing process for myself as well as many people. But whenever I feel challenged, so long as I don't put myself in harm's way, I do my best to face that challenge and to see what the source of the fear is. And a great example is the geographic move I'm in the process of making. There are a lot of people out there who have moved at least once in their lives, and it often shakes up their life in so many ways. Not everyone is able to even begin to consider moving because of the change that it represents. Unless they have a job to go to, a relationship to go to, the details all carved in stone before moving from point A to point B, a lot of times people fear doing that. I know I've encountered people numerous occasions who will say, "Oh, you're moving? I could never do that." They're too settled in their comfort zone. So I feel that one of the things that everyone can do, in essence, is step outside their comfort zone, however that takes shape in your life. Ask yourself, what is the nature of your comfort zone? And how can you step outside it to broaden your horizons? For me, moving has happened many times. Some people would suggest maybe I'm just a restless soul who doesn't know how to put down roots. But I do have children and I do have a legacy. So, I am doing things just in a different way than some people. But I feel that when we fall into that state of complacency where things get too comfortable, then it doesn't give us opportunities to grow. So when you also start to feel like people are triggering you, that's also a suggestion, a gentle nudge from the universe to ask yourself, what is that really about? If your vision of moving is to escape discomfort, then that's not the answer. But if your vision of change in your life, be it a move, relationship, change of job, is about facing fear, then that can be very beneficial. And you have to be willing to do things step by step, not have everything laid out for yourself. Be willing to accept that things don't all happen at once. It develops patience, universal principles, and a lot of the skills that we might admire in other people. Do either of you admire or are you inspired by people in your own lives these days?
Big time. Yeah. And it resonates so much with what you said, because I backpacked for 14 years across 60 countries. So and the funny thing is, half of that time I was running away and half of that time I was trying to build something new. So I totally understand what you mean there.
Yes, I can relate to you.
Yeah. Amazing. Daniela, you were about to say something. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I was going to ask if you could speak a little bit. I also forgot to mention that a big part of Liara's work is dream work and dream yoga. So I wondered if you could speak to a little bit, how does that support you, the dream work that you do personally, and then of course with clients, to continue to deepen in, I am perfect, whole, and complete, and that my entire perceived reality is a mirror without exception. How does dream work support you in both the left and the right?
Well, there are many different ways to approach dream work. And when we often hear that term, or dream analysis, dream interpretation, it's very much a left brain approach to fixing what's wrong with us. And that isn't a bad thing to have that approach. It's a great starting point where we might begin to remember glimpses of our dreams and wonder what they mean. And, there are dream dictionaries out there, and there are people you can work with to help interpret your dreams. And to me, that's a stepping stone to taking a deeper interest in what's going on inside yourself. And if people aren't able to remember their dreams consistently, then there are techniques you can use in order to begin to remember more consistently. And once you do, what happens is the way you look at dreams changes based on your level of consciousness. Now, there are different levels of dreaming. When I say that, I mean that sometimes we have very vivid, epic dreams. There are people who can maybe write a film script from the detail of their dreams. But in another way, dreams are also portals to different versions of ourselves. And what I mean by that is dreams can be used as tools in order to transform your reality when you're at that stage of life where you see that you take full and complete responsibility for everything that's happening. There's a part of you that is always awake and never sleeping. And that part of you can use dream worlds as tools in order to help create a different kind of existence in your waking life. Now, I'm not sure if our listeners or viewers, if they've got the video, are aware, but there are different levels of dreaming. And one of the ways that it's described by Tibetan sages is that we have sort of waking consciousness, we have, the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, different levels in between. But we have this favoritism in the West of waking life, assuming that that's more dominant, more prominent, that's more real than any other level of dreaming. So when we get out of dreams, we come back to reality. I'm talking to you now, I'm not asleep physiologically, so I'm awake, and this is the most important state. And yet really being awake in the physiological sense is only one state of dreaming, and there are others. So as you begin to see different levels of dreaming exist, you can shift your focus of attention. You can shift how you use your energy. You can shift how you translate your thought and feeling into manifestation. So it's one thing to have a vision board, for example. Many people are familiar with this concept. You decide you want to go somewhere, do something, create a vision of happiness. And you want to take that idea in your head and create it in a tangible form. So people will start with a vision board. And the more they look at certain things, the more it becomes more real. And what you can do is take that kind of exercise to a whole new level through dream yoga and actually see yourself passing through timelines, portals, different versions of yourself, and change your focus of energy and attention. And that changes the nature of your manifestation.
Wow.
Mic drop.
I know. Like, what do you say that? Amazing. Oh, incredible. What a great conversation for the start of a new year too, to get all that funk from the past out and start, creating with our minds in the way that we want to create versus what we're just, it's like I almost feel like we've had almost like a broken wand. You know how we're manifesting and creating all over the place, but we're not using it properly. So we're making stuff that's not, what we really wanted. And so getting our thoughts and things on a vision board really helps because it's like you're setting that intention on a daily basis. Every time you look at that board, you're helping to manifest it by just creating it in your own mind first, and then you create it in the physical reality.
Well, there's that vision that Jack Canfield had, one of the authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series with Mark Victor Hansen. He shares a story, Jack Canfield, about when he was sort of going through this process. He was in a stage of life where, he didn't have a lot of money and his vision hadn't manifest, essentially. So he started with the vision of $100,000 and he drew a picture of a $100,000 bill and he pasted it to his ceiling. And every day he'd look at that. It would be the last thing he looked at when he went to bed and the first thing he looked at when he woke up. And the first year that he did that, at the end of that year, he said he made $92,000. And it wasn't the 100,000 that he had envisioned, but it was darn close. And it was a heck of a lot better than he'd done the previous year. So that kind of an example is inspiring and it's empowering. And it tells us the importance of discipline, of consistency, of really having trust in ourselves. This goes further than belief. Now, one of the things that I would suggest to people is to reflect on this, but we are conditioned to have beliefs. And a lot of the beliefs we have, if not most of them, are fear-based. And so they can be problems. They tend to hold us back. But as you shift from beliefs to knowing or awareness, that's where the magic happens. That's the source of our energy and how we generate a new kind of vision. So in the case of Jack Canfield, he didn't say, I believe I'm going to make $100,000. He just said, I'm making $100,000. So the belief was taken out of it. It shifted into a vibration of knowing. And when you shift from belief to knowing or awareness, depending on the word you want to use, the vibration and the frequency of your entire being shifts. And the blockages that you unconsciously create to hold yourself back dissolve.
Amazing. I got to tell you, one of my favorite stories, it just popped into head. This is something I heard when I was about 23 years old. So it's been around for quite a while in my head. But there was this lady who was embodying the law of attraction. She was obsessed with winning $12 million. She wrote down 12 million everywhere. It'd be on little slips of paper all over the house. She would have it in her notebook, under her pillow. She just kept writing 12 million, 12 million, 12 million. And she would play the lottery. And it took her nearly a year. It took her 10 months. But she won 24 million. And the funny thing is, it was 12 million after taxes.
I love the humor, the sense of humor that the universe has.
Exactly, right? And what's funny about this story, and the reason why it stuck with me so much, is it was a horrible day. The rain was crazy, and I had to walk to work. My car wasn't working. It was in the shop, and I had to walk 1.5 miles to work. And I thought, well, if she can manifest $12 million, I'm going to manifest a ride to work. Like, if it really works that way, I'm going to do that. So I stepped out of my yard and I started walking down, and I said, somebody's going to pick me up. Somebody's going to pick me up. They're going to be here any second. And then sure enough, my friend drove by and he's on his way to work. And he's like, hey, Laura, you need a ride? And I just stared at him like, I can't believe it went like literally 3 minutes. It was so quick. I was astonished. And ever since then, I keep getting into my head. I'm like, no, you have to put in there what you want. You can't just, think willy-nilly. You have to actually like set your intention. And the more you set your intention on something very specific, the more the universe it's like all these things come together to make it happen.
Oh, they do. Look at parking spaces. I mean, how often do you say, I'm getting a parking space and it's just there? Or that job is mine, or, the new car is right there, or whatever it is in an affirmative way, how things just happen.
Yes, exactly. So the real question is, what are we doing wrong that's sabotaging our manifestation? That's the real question.
I guess that's one way to look at it. But, you can also sort of say, what are we doing? What can we do to get out of our own way is another way to look at it.
Yes.
To lift ourselves out of this heaviness of duality, that there has to be a right and a wrong, a good and a bad. If we can simply shift into that state that enables us to feel most alive. For some people, that is driving a race car around a track. It may be sailing for some people, who love feeling the wind in their hair and getting that sense of freedom, that reinvigoration that they don't get from doing other things. For me, sometimes it's aerial yoga, hanging upside down and doing acrobatics. Whatever it is, at different stages of life, it begins as thrill-seeking activities, things that we do to get the adrenaline rush. But at some stage, it shifts as we turn inward. We can experience that ecstasy, that aliveness in a different way. And that's part of what Dream Yoga is about. That's part of what manifesting differently is about. It's valuing ourselves and our forgotten capacities, putting things into practice that we actually know how to do, but we've temporarily forgotten.
it's easy to forget those things if we're not really knowing what we're doing, you know. We just kind of we're learning as we go, you know, and many of us are still kind of newbies when it comes to the law of attraction, because, you know, if your thoughts aren't in alignment, if you have any negative thoughts that you allow to come in, you can actually sabotage your own manifestations that way.
Selective awareness. The classic is, you know, you're heading off to work and you've got 5 things on the kitchen counter, and you get to work and somehow you've only got 3. You know, the other 2 are still sitting there on the counter, and you ask yourself, how could I possibly have forgotten? They were all right in front of my face, but it happens.
Yes.
Liara, what is the role of breath work in the journey of remembering what we are? I remember I'm struck by the story you shared in the 30 Shamanic Journey course, where you talked about whether, I think it was a mentor that you spoke to on the phone. You just did my memory is like, it was like a consult or a discovery call on the phone. And your takeaway from that session, that conversation, was they completely were able to reflect back to you things that people wouldn't know about you per se, just by their listening to your breath pattern while speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an intro for you in the world of holotropic breath work and breath practices.
Certainly, I can share that. Many people arrive at a point in their lives where they feel a little confused or baffled at why efforts they're exerting is not getting them the results that they envision. And I was at a stage like that in my life. And a friend of mine had gone to a business success breakfast, and there was a speaker, and it happened to be a psychotherapist who did breath work. And he did a practice with the participants. And this friend gave me a brochure and said, this was too woo-woo for me. Maybe you'll get something out of it. So I got a kick out of that perspective to begin with. But I decided to give this individual a call on the phone. And I was curious to learn more about what his breathwork practices were all about. And he has sharpened his listening skills in such a way that when he talks to people on the phone, he's able to tune in to their vibration, their energy field, their aura. He uses extrasensory perception in order to help people awaken to things within themselves. And in my case, he was able to tell me things about my life that I hadn't shared with anyone. So, you know, one of the things about human existence is we tend to be working our way back to this state of transparency. We tend to think we can hide things from ourselves, from the world, from people around us. And when this stranger was able to share with me some of the things I thought I was hiding very well, I was quite shocked initially. But then I realized that this was a wonderful tool that I could use to empower people, to help them see really what was going on with this tendency that they had and the sources of their fear. So that's what got me into the holotropic breathwork practices and training. And it's something that can be very complementary to psychotherapy, to other kinds of approaches to self-development. Sometimes people have trauma in their past. I would suggest that everybody has trauma. Now, there's big T trauma and little t trauma. Big T trauma I refer to as things like earthquakes, forest fires, you know, natural disasters that might destroy your house, your belongings, that kind of thing, or really serious diseases, or also things like sexual trauma during childhood, those kinds of things. Little t trauma is something that I would suggest everyone has, and that relates to our whole process of growing up, really. Naturalization isn't the right word. It's really the deconditioning or the conditioning that we experience when we're taught not to listen to ourselves, not to express how we feel in the moment. So when our needs aren't met in the moment from a very young age, we suppress how we feel. We might start by crying. We go through periods of tantrums, for example. This is quite common, to the point where we numb out from how we're truly feeling. And many people forget how to feel, forget how to really recognize what's going on within themselves. And so breathwork is a wonderful tool that helps people reconnect with these things, because one of the things it does is we are taught we have a conscious and an unconscious mind. And through breathwork, what you're doing is you're evening that out for a period. So you're gaining insight into the present moment timeline, and you're able to make connections between the sources of your fear. You see things from an external point of view, and you're able to join dots. So over the years, I've done over 500 sessions on myself before I started actually doing sessions with clients. And that way I'm able to draw from my own experience in terms of what I see and what I interact with. And of course, I'm not suggesting people need that many sessions. That was just part of my training. Typically, it's something that is used and referred to as a tool intermittently, or even a few times. And the revelations that people can have can be quite far-reaching.
Yes, absolutely. People are making some wonderful comments about breath work as well. I can tell people are using it already to kind of work their way through it. Does it help with meditation as well? If you practice breath work and meditation at the same time, does it? Because I have a problem with staying conscious. For some reason, every time I meditate, I am out like a light. So do you have any tips on that, by the way? Because I'm just curious, for people that struggle to meditate, would breath work help with that?
There are different kinds of breath work out there. The holotropic breath work I'm referring to, the trauma release breath work, is something that is a little more intense. But when it comes to meditation, we have pranayama, which is another way to look at breath work. We use that word in yoga. And they're more gentle practices that you can use in order to connect your thoughts with your body function and your feelings. So as you're going into a state of meditation, for example, the idea of counting can be very useful, counting the breaths that you have. There's a practice if you use a hand where you can inhale and follow your fingers with a finger from your other hand. So inhaling and exhaling, you combine your tactile sense with your mental sense, and it tends to help ground people. And there's also the idea of, focusing on the breath, focusing on what's going on physiologically. One of the differences between the holotropic breathwork and the pranayama that you're asking about is that the pranayama related breathing is typically done through the nose. And that's part of why people fall asleep, because you're relaxing and that's what you want to do. And with the holotropic breathwork, we breathe through the mouth, and it tends to evoke a bit more discomfort, the dry mouth, and it's easier to get in touch with that discomfort because it sort of comes to the surface. When it comes to meditation, for those people who do fall asleep, including you, Liara, it's okay, because it may be part of what your body needs. When you're shifting states of awareness, states of consciousness, there's a part of you that's always awake, but it's allowing you to see what's going on different timelines. It's just a matter of sharpening that awareness so that when you think you're falling asleep in one state, you can be more awake and conscious in another.
Wonderful. Yeah, I always end up getting called back to my body right when they're like, okay, you're coming back, you're starting to wake up. And I'm like, oh shit, I just missed the whole thing. I always come back at that moment. So it's like I'm checking out. Like, I don't think I'm actually asleep, even though some snoring may occur. But I don't think I'm actually asleep. So I've been trying to process that. So thank you for giving that distinction between the two, because, I have noticed a difference between breathing and it's funny because I try to do both. Like, I breathe in through the nose and then out through the mouth. Does that mean you're kind of doing both at the same time, or is that another form that people use?
Well, that's also very useful. It's a relaxing practice as well. The reason why we breathe through the nose is because we have those nasal hairs that purify or filter the air. And when you're filtering the air, if you're breathing in and out the nose, then you're filtering everything that comes in and comes out. So it tends to be a bit more relaxing. When you're breathing in the nose and out the mouth, that's sort of the next stage. It's still relaxing, but you're not bringing stuff up through the mouth. You're letting go of the stuff that doesn't feel good or the stuff you don't need. So that's okay. Have you ever had the experience when you're walking up an incline that you start to pant or puff. You shift
Yeah.
from breathing through the nose to breathing through your mouth.
Because you don't have the filter, you can get more flow going.
Right, but it also enables you to tire yourself out a little more. If you want to build up your endurance, then walking faster isn't the aim. The aim is really to breathe in and out your nose as you're working up the incline, because that's actually building your stamina and endurance faster than if you're speeding up.
Interesting. Uchiyama has a good question. Is that the reason why we sigh when we don't feel good?
Is what the reason we sigh when we don't feel good?
When we're releasing.
Yes, in some ways, it's sort of like the idea of
Deep breath.
letting go of something we no longer need. Yes. How often do we walk around like this? With our shoulders coming up to our ears, we don't even realize that we're carrying all this stuff that isn't necessarily even ours. So as we sigh, you're releasing something you no longer need.
Interesting, because I do it all the time without realizing it. My friends call me out on that. Like, why did you just sigh? And I was like, I don't know. It just came out. I don't know.
Well, even
So
just
is that
the
a
way we're sitting
subconscious
right
thing
now.
that we're doing? Our body's releasing without us even being aware of it then?
Well, there's so many ways we release too. My kids will joke, if they're burping or farting or doing all these physiological movements that, these are taboo subjects for a lot of adults. They don't want to talk about these things. But release happens in so many ways. We have so much to let go of. There's so much buildup in our bodies for different reasons. It can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be energetic. There's so many different levels. And in order to find homeostasis or rebalance, we have to be willing to let go of things. And if we're sighing a lot, then maybe there's more going on there that might warrant some investigation. But also just sitting here, we're all sitting on some level. It's interesting that over time, there's a huge number of people who sit during the day for work or wherever they are. And their shoulders will rise, and they won't even notice. Or the other thing is they'll start to slouch. One shoulder will go down, the other shoulder will go down, the one lung will sort of collapse, and they'll wonder, why are they having trouble breathing? But posture is so important. We talk about this in yoga.
I'm always
but
slouching. I need to work on that actually. I'm gonna put my shoulders back.
even if you don't do yoga, just a simple posture check. If you think of pilots in a plane, they have their checks that they do before they take off and they land. Whenever you're doing anything, you just want to check the state of your spine. Is it straight? Check, is your head aligned with your shoulders, or are you, sagging to one side or the other? If your shoulders are rising up, can you drop them down? How many different ways can you allow your body to relax? So often we've got different parts of the body that are in different states of stress, and we don't even notice the tightness because we numb out from it. So even the meditation practices that people may do or may be willing to explore, where you just close your eyes and you just do a simple body scan, and you sort of notice, where am I feeling a little tight? You could start at your toes and just imagine through your mind's eye that you're scanning the body, and you notice, well, is there any area of tightness or any area that would benefit from different kind of attention or release? And then you can focus on that with different practices.
Wonderful. I just saw Margaret's question. Is that the same as when you're yawning?
Yawning is another kind of release. And I find it funny with breath work or with other practices I do with people, they feel quite self-conscious. They'll feel like, oh no, I'm yawning, sorry. They'll apologize. Whereas really, this is one of the ways that the body naturally lets go. So you want to allow yourself
We've
to
been
yawn.
convinced it's boredom, oh, you're just tired, I must be boring you now. Somebody starts yawning. That's immediately what we first assume. So that's a great point.
That's right. The negative assumptions that we hold are part of the reason why we hold tension, why it's harder to let it go. We impose guilt or shame for certain practices that we're taught are not natural, or we're taught that we ought not to talk about because it's not a good thing. We judge it. So to me, being around people who are more open-minded can help us step outside of that.
Excellent. Chantel says, you just made me yawn. Contagious yawning is
I don't take it as an insult. It's okay.
It's funny. Yes, amazing. And it's funny too, because we don't realize when we're doing things like I just sitting here for the last 30 seconds in the correct posture, you start to feel it too, because I'm always such, I'm always talking to you guys like this, you know, like you don't realize how much you are actually making yourself kind of crooked throughout the day without even being aware of it. So it's funny how much we're, yeah. Now it feels weird now to be sitting. It's so funny. It's just, you don't realize how much you do things subconsciously, you know, how much you're not even, there's so much to learn about reconnecting with our bodies that, you know, I'm so glad you're talking about this.
Body, mind, and spirit are all connected, but we're taught that they're fragmented. And so it's very helpful to address each one individually before you can really acknowledge the wholeness. And not everybody walks around with a mirror to check their posture all the time. So it is kind of funny. You know, many people will relate to what you're saying, and it's a matter of being more mindful. So as you meditate or you work on mindfulness practices, you're just more aware. Oh, gee, I'm feeling a little stiff in my back. I wonder why. Oh, maybe I ought to, you know, change the way I'm sitting, or maybe I have one shoulder that I'm carrying higher than another. That often happens too.
I notice for myself when my posture is, I almost want to say when I feel my vessel in an empowered posture, just support aligned, I think differently. I perceive more accurately. I feel more equipped to speak if I'm scared to, right? So I really notice that my posture has really significant ripple effects in the way I think, feel, perceive, act.
Yes, it certainly does, because it sort of speaks about the energy flow through your body. And for energy to flow freely, you have to be allowing it to move. And if we're slouched or, you know, in a position that inhibits the free flowing movement of energy, then that's going to translate into things like self-acceptance, self-worth, confidence. When we see people who are public speakers, I love this as an example. I've done public speaking courses over the years to help work on my own self-confidence. And you don't tend to see people walk up on stage hunched over, hiding their eyes, you know, and wanting to go away. You see people walk up with their head held high as if they know what they're doing, as if they have something that's worth listening to. And in order to invite people to validate us and see us as worthy, we have to begin with that feeling, that awareness of ourselves. And that's what radiates from us. It comes through in the tone of our voice. It comes through in our body language. And it comes through in our gestures, how we spend our time, whether or not we give people the time of day. You know, all of these things that we do reflect how energy is flowing within us and in which directions.
Oh, that's beautiful. It just reminds me what you're saying. One of my teachers puts out at the beginning of every year a message, you know, for 2024. And here's her message. It's just 3 short sentences. Stand tall in your dignity. Be open to grace. Remain connected to your divinity. And it's the first message she's put out that really had an invitation to how you hold yourself. Stand tall in your dignity. Be open to grace and remain connected to your divinity.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really good message for 2024 too. Yeah. This year is really getting intense already. You know, so much is being called forward so that way we can kind of transmute it, I feel, is the real reason why so many, it's like a bunch of, everybody's kind of going through something tough right now, you know? And I feel like a big reason for that is because we're meant to transmute that energy into something more positive. Do you have any advice for people that are going through something like that right now that could, help them through that?
Well, that is certainly a description of what many people are, in fact, encountering. And I guess one of the things that I'd invite people to recognize is that challenges are our friends. So often, when we can see the silver lining in a situation, we have a shift inside ourselves. And some people would say blessings in disguise. Don't allow blessings to wear disguises in your life. Allow yourself to see blessings wherever you are, come what may. And rather than allowing yourself to examine things and say what's wrong with or what isn't going right, allow yourself to sort of say, this is a nudge in the best possible direction for me. This is guiding me into the best version of myself. So rather than sort of saying to yourself, oh, I didn't get that job, for example, or oh, my relationship is falling apart, or oh, my world is not what I had planned it to be, look at where you are and all the reasons you have to be grateful and all the things that are enabling you to feel most alive, because that is helping to ground you. That is helping to center you in your source energy and to catapult you forward in incredible directions.
Thank you for that. Very helpful. So many people probably have questions about these sort of things. If you guys have a question for Liara, please do leave it in the comments. If you have any questions about, just the breath work is the one big thing that I'm learning the most about right now, because we don't realize that I hold my breath whenever I do it all day long, as I don't realize that I'm doing it. And when you hold your breath, is that something else you don't realize that you're doing subconsciously?
Certainly, it's very widespread. In terms of breathing, it's not something we're taught, is it? From a very young age, most people, when they're born, start breathing when they come out of their mother's womb. And from that point forward, it's an involuntary practice. They just allow it to happen and they go on with whatever else they're doing. But in truth, every time we suppress our feelings, we don't allow our needs to be met, what happens is we are affecting our breathing. And that's part of why such a large number of people will be breathing in their chest, because ultimately we're supposed to be breathing from our belly. Now, if our listeners and viewers just put their hands on their belly for the moment and they inhale and exhale, it's useful to notice which direction is the belly going as you inhale. Is it going in or is it going out?
Well, we inhale, it's pulling in, right? Yeah. No. You're making me think too much now. I'm like, I can't tell.
Well, we don't typically think about these things, do we? But if we're in a sedentary position, that is, if we're seated and we're not really exerting ourselves, then the natural way for the body to function is for the belly to go out when you inhale and to go in as you exhale. And if you watch a baby breathe, that's what happens. But the vast majority of people will be inhaling and having their belly go in and exhaling as their belly goes out. And if you're doing it in that direction, your body is in a state of fight or flight or stress. And it also prompts people to stop breathing in their belly. They move into their lower chest, their middle chest, or their upper chest. Upper chest breathing tends to indicate stress, anxiety, panic attacks. There are a number of issues that are characterized by upper chest breathing, such as asthma, for example. So when we do things like meditation and other spiritual practices, which help us get in touch with nature, with what enables us to feel alive, we become more aware of not only the rhythm of the breath and how we're breathing, but also from where we're breathing. Because when we look from the inside out, we see things differently than when we look from the outside in.
It's a game changer, friends, to relearn, different words for it, belly breathing, so that you return to that state of, first of all, having your system regulated and relaxed. It's a game changer. It is a wild and incredible starting point I would say the spiritual journey is how are you breathing? Because Liara, what you just said is so brilliant and spot on, that many of us are in a perpetual state of tension. Even Enneagram is so not about breath work, and yet they describe it, sometimes it's described as the 9 ways we carry our unique tension and the 9 pathways to relaxing your whole being. We have to relearn. We have to relearn, actually, to relax, to be in our natural state, right? It's very difficult to put new processes on top of a tense system. It's hard to learn, whereas Kim Beekman would say, ground vata before doing anything else. Don't put your learning on top of a tense system. So this is, and James Nestor's book, Breath. Do you recommend that to people, Liara? If this is an interesting topic, I would assume maybe you've read it.
I have read it.
Yeah.
There are lots of books out there. It's a very good way to gain some insights into different kinds of breathing practices. It's certainly something that's accessible to many different kinds of readers. If you're looking at something more from a practitioner's point of view, or you want to get into breath work, then there are other books such as Gitan Tonkov's Biodynamic Breathwork. He talks about his journey from being a trumpet player to getting into massage and then breathwork, and how there are all these different kinds of breathing techniques he learned as a musician, and how he translated them into the breathwork on different levels. But like what you're saying, he talks about relaxation on different levels, because so often many people don't know what relaxation is. We're taught relaxation is just to sit down on the couch and to chill out or to listen to music. But the body doesn't necessarily or automatically go into a state of relaxation when it's tense. It doesn't know how. So there is this rewiring of the brain that does happen or can be trained so that we can discover those 9 levels you're talking about and more.
Chantel's comment a little back caught my eye. Laura, do you want to rewind to that? She had a question about dreams. She's the one. I know there's wild dreamers here. Chantel's like, I'm interested in the dream aspect. Yeah. Can we talk more about vivid, all caps, wild dreams, please? Flying too.
Yes.
That's funny. Well, what one person considers normal is someone else's version of the extraordinary, right? So there are lots of dream things out there that are common ideas of the impossible, that suddenly we can do things in different worlds that people feel inhibited from, fearful of, or unable to do in the physical body. So everyone's dreams have different significance based on their level of consciousness, but a good point of departure can be some of those dream dictionaries that will give you an overview of what certain states are or what certain symbols might mean. But I caution people to sort of use those as a black and white description of what's going on within themselves. If you look at something like death dreams, for example, this comes up quite often with people I encounter. There's a lot of fear surrounding death dreams, especially if loved ones are seen to die in a dream. But when you look at dreams as metaphors rather than take them literally, then you can allow yourself to apply a new level of understanding to your day-to-day living. So when it comes to death, for example, the idea of new beginnings, being open to new beginnings, to change, or your resistance to change can be something you can put into practice and help you step out of the fear of death as we're taught as a culture. And when it comes to something like flying, again, this can have different meanings for many different people. But one of the common themes is the idea of freedom. You know, if you're able to fly in your dreams and feel that sense of lack of inhibitions, you know, the idea of being uninhibited, being boundless, being limitless, where in your life do you feel pinned down? Where do you feel constrained? Where are you creating traps for yourself or not allowing yourself to step outside of a cage? When you look at things from a metaphorical point of view, it helps you step outside of the limiting idea of, oh, gee, I'm flying in my dream. I can't fly now. Isn't that horrible? Sometimes people will limit themselves to a literal meaning of something they seem to be doing in one world and aren't able to do in another. And then they miss the wisdom that's there. They miss that stepping stone that can enable them to change some area of their lives or expand into a new version of themselves.
Yes.
Chantel says, I love, all caps, flying dreams like Peter Pan. That is so cool. That is so cool, Chantel.
They are very cool. And it is a popular one, certainly.
Matt has a question. What if you're not afraid when dying in a dream? I dreamt I was killed and reincarnated as my killer, but I was so calm. What does this mean?
Well, again, there's always more than one meaning to a dream, but when people believe in the wheel of karma, the idea that what comes around goes around, or what goes around comes around, the idea is that an experience you have in one lifetime or on one timeline, you're going to have the opposite experience on another timeline or in another world, in order for you to deepen your understanding of the full circle of possible experiences. So the idea of calmness is simply a reflection of inner knowing that this is a learning journey. This isn't something to fear. This is something you create for your own soul growth.
So do you coach people on these sort of things? Tell me a little bit more about your business and what you are offering for people for doing this kind of work, because I'm sure there's a lot of us who would benefit from this.
Well, when I do life coaching, people have their own ideas of what life coaching is. I could say I'm a dream coach, I'm a life coach, I'm a psychotherapist. I sort of work with people to guide them to blossom into the best version of themselves. And often we have a vision of where we'd like to be, not always how we can get there, but we're not always aware of how we're holding ourselves back. So dreams can be a tool for growth. And sometimes people will examine dreams with me on a regular basis. Sometimes people will decide breath work can be useful, or they'll ask me for my suggestions of which tools in my toolbox would be most beneficial. And I offer programs, courses online that people do, which are a combination of reading and one-on-one sessions with me. I offer psychotherapy in and of itself, but I also tend to draw from the breath work, draw from the dream work as part of whatever I sense would be beneficial to the person, and also their level of consciousness. So for example, when it comes to dreams, there's some people that are at a stage where they don't remember them regularly, or they're in a state of fear and they're not yet at a place where they're ready to use them to catapult themselves forward as you would in dream yoga. So there are different stages of how you can use dreams based on how you take levels of responsibility in your life. So to me, there's a direct correlation between your thoughts, your feelings, and the actions you take in your life. Much way there are correlations that can be made between your body language, your gestures, the tone of your voice, the people you interact with, and the visions you hold. There's a saying, the 5 people you spend the most time with are the 5 people you're becoming. And when it comes to that kind of an analogy, we can ask ourselves, okay, if we're around people who are involved in self-sabotage or self-defeating tendencies, or who are always complaining about what they're not doing, is that the kind of person we would like to be? Or would we like to be around people who inspire us, who guide us in new directions, or inspire us to do something new, to step outside of our comfort zone? It depends on how you're feeling, but I find that's a really good rule of thumb to start with wherever you are. Just reflect on how you spend your time and with whom, and if that's inviting you to grow or not.
That's an invaluable self-insight question. Yeah.
Really, I really resonated with that. Thank you. I'm gonna get I've got a link for your website here for those of you who would like to work with Liara, because you have a broad spectrum of things that you kind of work with, don't you?
I do. I start with what's called a discovery call, if that's useful to people, where we sort of talk about personal situations, their visions or goals, or what's not working. And then I give them proposals. I suggest what may be helpful to them. I look at things like the desired financial commitment, the time commitment you want to put into something. If you have a specific goal on a timeline, sometimes people are developing a business, for example, and they have a launch date for something. So they have a limited period of time during which they want to do something. Other times they have less constraints and they're more open-minded or don't have those things to consider. But whatever the situation is, I'm open and willing to talk about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, because many of us that it's like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that's why so many of these wonderful teachers are being brought on this podcast. So that way, if anybody resonates with what you say and how you teach, they can contact you. So that's really the main reason of doing these podcasts, is so that we can have so many wonderful teachers with so many different perspectives and unique gifts and talents come together. And I'm just so glad that we got to meet you, Liara, because there's so much I could talk to you about. Like, we could spend, we're definitely going to have you back sometime, because this is right up our alley. This is exactly what we've been kind of looking for, as a way to, recognize these things within ourselves, the unconscious behaviors that we have that are signs that there's something going on. We just don't know what those mean. So it's a very powerful thing to get to know your body and your reactions to things that maybe is something as small as a sigh. Could say a lot.
Yes, what you say is so true. Making the unconscious conscious is so important. And when you're ready to do so, the opportunities are knocking, different ways that we can use to see ourselves from a different point of view.
Liara, thank you very much for your graciousness, for your being up in the middle of the night in Australia to be here with you. Friends, Liara is a really very qualified and skillful guide. And the greatest investments I've made in myself were at the right times in my journey, and I continue to just find qualified guidance. It's deep work happens in mentorship. Deep work happens in with a guide, and it's good to explore and see what it is you're looking for, and how someone can support your coming back into your own power. Our greatest protection is our inner alignment, is our inner clarity, is our inner healing work. That is feeling and being protected is the outcome of that. That's the outcome. So, Liara, thank you for all of those that you have really, truly helped over the years. And friends, there's great resources on Liara's page, and maybe we can chat about bringing the 30 Shamanic Questions program over into membership, or anything else you're super enthused about currently. That would be wonderful.
That's a wonderful idea, Daniela. We could certainly discuss that. I just want to thank all the viewers or listeners out there for being with us today. And it's always a joy for me to talk about breathwork, guide people to remember or rediscover what enables them to feel most alive. Because ultimately, that may be why we're here. If that resonates with you, is to reconnect with that which enables you to feel alive, grounded, centered in yourself. Because when we're centered in ourselves, that's when we get this, we put this out into the world, we radiate it, and we can also set a wonderful and inspiring example for people to find that within themselves.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Happy Friday to everybody for whom it is still Friday, and and enjoy your Saturday, Liara. And we really appreciate you very much. And love you, Lara. Mwah.
Love you guys.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.